Hello, and welcome to the March 17th Octant community meeting. Today, we've got a few things to talk about. We're going to talk about the dynamic cache refactor that we mentioned last week and is now officially up for review this week. Some updates for our example plugins. Some coverage on a feature to allow metadata to be sent into plugins, and a resource viewer preview. So, which that's exciting. So, with that, I will start with the much faster dynamic cache. So there was in previous community meetings we had discussed some CPU things, and in an effort to kind of address some CPU stuff, but more generally just speed things up. I felt like things have always been a little slow, and generally the team has felt that we would watch demos of people use Octant and go, "Oh man, that seems slow." So um, I was looking at it with that lens of maybe I can get some CPU increase, probably I can get some speed increase, and I did not get any CPU improvements, but I did not make it worse. And so that is, to me, that is a net win, because the end result is that on average we're seeing a 30 to 50x improvement in load times for resources within Octant, which is it still blows my mind a little bit. I don't know. Looking at the old code, I spent some time looking at the old code, trying to figure out what we were doing so wrong before, like what I was doing so wrong. But I wrote the old code, so I was like, how did I get this so wrong that it is so slow compared to the refactor I did? But that's just how it goes sometimes. So I still have not yet fully I haven't fully figured out why the old version was so slow. I do have some ideas of why the new version is much faster. That said, there's a PR up right now, 2144. It's got a couple outstanding to-do tasks. I also called out just some general notes around some implications for this change. Nothing that'll really impact folks. There is a slight there's a slight change to expectations of what you have access to with verbs in Octant, meaning we'll now expect you to have watch to a resource, and if you don't have watch to a resource, there's no longer this attempt to fall back to this list get polling semantic. And I I suspect that will not impact many folks, and in fact, it will make a lot of people's experiences better, because generally, what we're seeing with people who are working in RBAC restricted environments, or where they only have access to a certain namespace, is they have access to all of the verbs for a set of resources. Maybe not like the ability to create, but they get the standard set of list get watch. And so uh, trying this to be smart and fall back to list and get when we fail to watch. It was, I think there was times where that just wasn't working correctly. The watch was starting and it just hadn't synced yet. We didn't wait a couple milliseconds longer for the cache to sync. So we went ahead and did a manual list call, which is anyway, I think we were overloading some API calls that we didn't need to, and we were trying to be too smart and too fancy. They were just oh, we'll do everything and make sure that you never see a failure. Now it's just we'll watch it. If the watch fails, you get an explicit message that you don't have permission to watch this resource, and then it just doesn't show up. If you can, we've tested it where it's I am in a namespace and all I can do is watch pods. And if you go to the pod view, you can see and list the pods. There is some breakage that exists today, even so it's not a regression where if you only have the ability to list and get pods, and you go try to view the details, sometimes that details view will break because we're trying to render events, and you might not have permission to events. So there's going to be an effort to trap errors where they happen and then respond appropriately, and let the components kind of render their own error messages. So instead of the pod summary being this gross, like, oh, you have you can't watch events or you can't see events, it'll render all the pieces for the pod, and then the events area, that table will say you don't have the ability to watch events. If you want to populate this table, you know, add that permission. And so it'll be a much better experience for users, and just generally will allow us to handle those error cases a lot better. This also fixes the issues of inconsistency with the API, where before you would attempt to do like a list and it would get access denied, and then we would return access denied, but then we would cache that. And then instead of trying to do a list again, since you didn't have access to the resource, we would return a null object. I still to this day, like when I say that out loud, it is, I wrote that too. It's very embarrassing when I say it out loud, but it's fixed in this. And so I was going to just show a short little demo, stop, of this running under Electron. Let's see, here it is. Let me fire it up. Okay, there's Octant. Okay, so this is a Octant running, and I'll just make it one bigger just to make it easier, a little bit easier to see. So I launched this and then shared it so I could actually attach to the window, and you can see it was already populated. Now this is just a mini cube with very little stuff in it, but you can see as I switch to cube system, the quickness in which, if you've used Octant before, the speed at which this change happens is it's great. It is really great. I'm very pleased with it. And then as you drill down into the various items, right, they all load at that same speed, where the limitation on how fast things are loading now is actually on our internal worker event loop. If you catch it at the beginning of the loop, you'll have to wait the entire 1 second to get the next content response. But if you catch it at the right point, you like, sometimes the pages load almost instantly. So it's pretty great. And then switching, if you ever switched contexts in Octant before, you know how long that can take. And so here I've just switched to context. It's pulled CRDs. Now I have all deployments. I have pods. And then I can start to browse these things just right away. And you can see my CRD list is here. You can go look at my CRDs. And then I can switch right back to the minikube. And you see, this is part of that graceful, like, hey, you switched namespaces, you were looking at a custom resource. That custom resource doesn't exist in this namespace, so we'll just give you a not found page. That generally didn't happen very well before, because it would like try to do some error, or it would return a nil response because it couldn't find it. So now it's, I don't think there's anything in this namespace, but switch to cube system. And so, yeah, if you've used Octant previously, and you're seeing this now, you know why this is a great improvement. If you've not used Octant, this is your first time seeing it, this is probably how you expect it to work. So very pleased with the outcome of this. And there was one issue that came up, and I call it out in the PR, which is occasionally you'll get these messages. It's really, it's out of the reflector.go. There are these warnings about how it was unable to decode meta v1 event. Now, if you used Octant previously, we used to get some warnings about this list and watch that would sometimes come into the console. And I don't know what ever generated those either. But I asked some folks about this error specifically, and if I should worry about it, if it was going to cause memory leaks or cause like stray API calls or workers to be spun off. And the consensus was no. Also, no one could give me a clear answer as to why my informers were generating this error, but the consensus was you don't have to worry about it. And I was like, fair enough. We also did some non-scientific testing by, I just let Octant run for like 3 days straight and watched the memory, and it didn't grow in an insane amount. My cluster didn't get spammed and fall down. There, funny. This is funny. When Sam and I were initially testing this PR, GKE decided to do an upgrade of the clusters and was like rolling nodes and doing this weird upgrade. And I thought that my PR had crashed the cluster. I was like, oh no, is this thing like going nuts? But it was just some hiccups due to a rolling upgrade, and everything was fine. So anyway, I think that's all I have for that. Does anyone have anything to add? I know some other folks have used it.
Yeah, I tested it briefly. I think this is incredible. Just overall responsiveness is just probably order of magnitude better than it used to be. So I think everybody will see huge speed improvement. As you said, this is the way it should work. So I'm really excited to try this on master. The Lighthouse, you didn't mention that, Wayne, but I did some testing with the Lighthouse performance index, and on my Mac it jumped from 5 to 46. So that tells a lot, and I think it's a good representation of overall loading time in the browser and responsiveness. So it's amazing.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Milan, for running that Lighthouse test. I wasn't able to do it because in Electron, the Lighthouse only works if there's the HTTP protocol involved. And so with the local render, it's actually even a little faster, which is great. Yeah,
I tested it in Chrome.
Cool. So moving on to the next item, I'll let Sam take this one since it's all work that Sam did. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So this one is, if you could click the link to the example plugins repo, it's still work in progress, but essentially we discussed this in the last community meeting where the sample plugin we have is capturing a ton of patterns, and it can be a little unwieldy to even just over time as we continue to just add things on there. It could just be unwieldy to understand all of the possible features of a plugin. And so this just breaks them down into smaller repos that does only one thing, specifically one thing, and effectively give at a glance documentation for a very specific thing that you're trying to do. So most of this stuff is boilerplate, but we just, a lot of the comments within the code was just rewritten to pinpoint, to show like this is the thing that is different about this particular plugin to help isolate that. It's still missing a lot of the TypeScript equivalents. It should be possible. I think we just held off on that because we're really trying to hit that March 24th release date. So community contributions also accepted because I think these are just the easy first time issues, or you have interest in building out plugins but don't quite know what to build yet. Some of this stuff is also kind of nice because we know exactly what to build and it's already scoped to a very specific feature. And so we'll keep adding onto this over time. I already have like another 4 or 5 more patterns off the top of my head that I'd like to see added in here. So so hopefully this will be a resource that we can start pushing more formally, and moving forward, hopefully clear up some of the confusion around what plugins can or cannot do.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm actually going to add one right now so I don't forget, which I'll call it a local event loop. Yeah, let's call it that. Commit that right directly. Committed directly. There. That's a popular. That one comes up a lot. Like, I want to write a plugin, but I don't want my thing to be called every second. And so, I think that. And then I think probably like a storage one is probably a good one too. So, yeah, thanks for this work, Sam. This is great. This is already more useful than it originally was, and we'll continue to push changes here. And just to reiterate, this is a great place for first time contributions and just like getting started. And it's like a lot of bite-sized chunks here that can that are easy to get into. So all right, this next one is I think it's the one. I think, yeah, so this one was added by Vikram. Do you want to talk about this one a bit, Vikram?
Sure. So this story and its corresponding PR that relates to JS plugins, they're all addressing the use case where people with their own custom store implementation might want to use additional data from the plugin. And the use case that we are looking for in this specific scenario is where we have a store implementation, where we use a proxy which needs access to some tokens that we can pass to the store. And it's currently not possible. I mean, it was not possible with the plugins, but with this change, you could add an extra argument to all the calls to the store methods, and all these random key values will be passed over to the context, and the store can use the key set in the context, to address the issues for the missing values.
Awesome. Yeah. This is a pretty cool change for people who are looking to like extend to Octant or do custom things with Octant. One of the other things that came up out of this was the idea of like, you have some data set that represents maybe like what a cluster used to look like or what a cluster is gonna look like, and you create an object store like an object store implementation that satisfies this interface, and then the metadata can be used to like fetch the specific, like either a time slice or a series, or like you can use that metadata to kind of do whatever you want. And then you could essentially have an Octant running on like a cluster that doesn't exist, right? It's just like, it might exist or it used to exist, or and you could instead of having to like mock and fake all of these API calls through like fork Octant, you can use metadata so that your object store implementation can just inspect metadata and then do short circuits to go fetch what it needs to fetch or do what it needs to do. It's pretty neat, because there's another PR that's kind of related to this where you can inject the object store. For those who aren't familiar with how Octant starts up, there's a runner that you use when you're extending Octant, and there was a set of work that let you inject the set of options into that runner, and those options can include your store now. So you combine the ability to inject a store with the ability to add context specific metadata to those store methods, and it provides a much better interface for people extending Octant to do embedded data or data that requires extra access tokens, things like that. And thanks to Vikram, this is supported both in the Go for Go plugins making object store calls and JavaScript plugins making object store calls. Any questions or comments on that before we move on? All right. So last one, a resource viewer preview, which I assume is from Milan.
Yes. All right, let me share the screen. Wow. Let's try. I was hoping to share the, I never shared on this new Mac, and I was hoping to share just the window, but Zoom interface is kind of weird. Let me try that again. I'll just share the desktop. Come on. Maybe I will not give it that much today. Zoom is not working with me. Yeah, I had to reopen the Zoom. I'm sorry.
No, no problem. So while we wait for Milan to get back, we can give a little progress update. Oh, wait, he's back running. Never mind. All right. Attempt number 2.
That's much better. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So, yeah, we've been talking about the resource viewer quite a bit recently, thinking about it, doing different approaches, trying different things. And basically what I'm trying to do right now is just for this next release, kind of do the first step in a what we think is going to be a little longer road in improving how the resource viewer works and how we interact with it. And the starting point was this design, which
Hey, Milan,
is
sorry. Can you make the browser a little wider?
Sure. Is that better?
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Cool. So the starting point was this research and design that Isha did a little while back. And basically, based on all that knowledge that she collected, this is kind of initial approach we wanted to take. And I've been working on this. And this is where I am right now. So I created a bunch of stories in a storybook just to cover all the different use cases. And differences you can see, it's pretty much just the changes in style. So the boxes look a little better. The text is a little easier to read. We have the icons inside each box indicating the status. Also, selection is indicated better, and selection is also set initially when you open a new view. I'll show that in Octant later. So small improvements just in visual appearance of the resource viewer is kind of a first step we want to take. And then I can show some other layouts and how they look. So this is pretty similar to the what Isha designed, except we still don't have this expand and collapse feature that's coming a little later. But actually, I cheated a little bit in this, and I'll explain that later when I show the Octant. But it's kind of attempt to show the deployments at the top, and then replica sets pods, and it's a top-down view. And the way some other layouts look as, so for views that have ingress, this is how they look currently. you can still see that in this case, there's 5 boxes in a row. You can still see, even if you have only like a half screen. Let me update that because this doesn't update. You can still read every pretty much even the kind and type. So this is kind of what's this iteration has been my goal, just to show it at least 5 boxes inside the row initially without in this side of the screen, which I think is pretty typical. It's probably 1200 pixels wide. If you have, so this is a very small layout. If you get to the other extreme, still need to work on this, obviously. But when you use, I mean, there's not much improvement here, but we have some ideas how to do that, and I'll show that here. So this is a little less extreme CRD view that has 12 boxes, which is a, I think, lower limit when things get a little more complicated. But if you look at this view and analyze it, some interesting things start to show up. For example, something like this. You can see that there's a huge amount of clustering here going on. So if you can display this initially, something like this, and then allow user to expand, then we'll give enough information initially without overwhelming user with the the whole image. So something like that, we're hoping to apply to complex views like this one in the future. And let me go to Octant. This is how this looks in Octant. As you can see, I also worked on a dark theme. Colors are slightly different, selection, lines, and you can see that they change text colors as well. So if I go back to the, where's that? I'm sorry, echo. So this is exactly the same deployment as the one I showed previously here.
I can tell you're using the old version of Octant by the
loading
time.
It's obvious. So see, this is how the same deployment looks by default. But if you make just a couple of changes that I did in the storybook page, you get a much nicer view. And the only thing we need to do to get from there to here is just to rearrange the edges inside our structure. So nodes are exactly the same. We just need to rearrange the edges on the back end, which shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, shouldn't be.
Right.
No, this is great. The only initial feedback I have immediately is that I'm having a really difficult time distinguishing the icon from the background.
Right.
And in I felt like in Pia or in Isha's design, it was like the white. I think I like that better.
That shouldn't be hard to change. I'll go back. I'll make it the same way, the same color as the text.
Yeah, I think I like that better.
Right.
Because the green it's already like, it's already going to have the green check showing through the card. And so, but other than that, this is, I mean, I know it's just a style change, but like there's a lot to style. Like it goes a long way. And I think this just like the current design of the current style of the resource view is pretty rough. And this is I think this is a nice improvement.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly style, but it's also the
if we get the order,
some interactivity is changed too. So you can double click now, for example, that takes you directly to secret.
Oh,
Um,
oh, you didn't say that.
right. Thank you for reminding.
I like that a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So any of those you double click, it'll take you right into.
For some reason, any except pod, because as you can see, there is no link here either. I don't know why we don't
Okay.
do link, but we can definitely change that.
Yeah, I think we would want that to work universally. So whatever that ends up being that we need to fix to make it so that you can double click and follow that link, that would be great, because I really like that feature. I find it, I guess, pod, because what if there's a bunch of them? Which one do you go to?
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's probably why pod is like that, because normally it would show the list of all the pods. But there might be a good way to, here's some, no. Yeah, I don't know a good way to do it. Anyway, we'll think about it.
We can go to first or something like that.
Yeah.
And
then the other thing is, so I didn't even think of it until I saw this view here. The green in the graph and the green in the object status are different than the green in the actual card. And it's
the same color, it's just the opacity is different.
I see.
So I can increase opacity in boxes too, but I thought it looks nice with a little bit of opacity, especially with the border. If you look, and so this is their color.
Yeah,
icon is the same color, but then the background has I think opacity of 0.6 or something like that. I don't remember what's the last one there is.
Yeah, maybe just making the strike, the border, a little thicker would tie the like. I see what you're saying. I agree. Like having it kind of softened is nice, but like in this view in particular, where you have two instances of the other green, it feels like it just looks completely different.
Right. Yeah.
But no, this is great. Yeah, this is, and I like it. Any other? Who else has feedback? Why am I talking?
Yeah, Milan, you mentioned this very briefly. Like there was one case where you mentioned that we could actually cluster a few of these nodes.
Right.
And it's like, it reminds me of like I wonder, like, one, it's like whether or not we can actually define these relationships as a directed graph. And then like, I remember there's like, this is a long time ago, there's like this idea of like a strongly connected component in graphs, where you can like separate out like a graph into essentially groups based on whether or not every single node in that particular group can reach each other. And if we can do that, we can kind of algorithmically generate these like larger subgroups, like depending on how relationships are defined. Like it might not be, like the directions might not be in the way that we think they are. Because sometimes, right, like if we think about like between like, say, a deployment in a pod, it's pretty straightforward, or like maybe between like, say, storage, but like something like for example, this cluster API, like, I don't know. I don't know, like if they had a direction, what would they be?
Yeah, I think that's why we benefit from the, like, in that situation, we would benefit from the generic, like, this is the thing that you're looking at is the center. And then it's just kind of, we're not trying to tell you the direction. We're just showing you the clusters that are connected to it. And then like, yeah, instead of trying to guess at the directionality of things, just getting them grouped, even if they were just grouped like this, that is to me a better view than the default.
Right. No, that's exactly the idea. I think I agree with both of you. And actually, Cytoscape, the library we use, has a support for detecting. It has a lot of different APIs, and some of them can be used just to detect situations like this. I have not tried them yet, but I think that's based on a first look, it looks really promising. That can solve situations like this one, and especially I would be really curious to run that on something like this. But here you can see the same thing. Actually, this one is a little more specific because if I can find a secret here, it's even hard to find. Because, oh yeah, that must be secret or service. So secrets and service are used by a lot of other resources. So this is really hard, this is, and you don't want your secret or service to be like a center. They're more like attached to whatever object they're used in.
Yep. And I think Isha thought about that in some of the designs, right, of being able to like toggle off secrets so they weren't part of the graph. Yeah. And I think that does make a lot of sense, right? Like,
right.
Or and maybe when you do toggle them on, their lines are like dashed in a different, like instead of like it being a part of this, it's just like there's another line that says I'm used by all of these things, but I'm not the center of it, right? Like, because this view right here, it looks like that secret is like the root of this thing. And like, and I guess in a way it is, because if it wasn't there, none of this stuff works, but also it's misleading.
So secret service accounts, they should almost be like outside of the chart, or maybe not connected, or connected with a different colors.
Yeah, or like just thinking about this a little more, like if the secret and service account weren't connected, and then they were on there, like at the bottom, like you have them, right? And they had a little badge with a number that number represented all the things that used it. And then when you clicked on it, object status showed a list of all the things that were using that secret.
Right.
So the secret's never actually even part of the graph that we draw. It's just, but it's there, things are using it, and you can click to see a list of all the things that are using it. And then maybe from there you could click and say, show me, like, don't like draw the lines from secret to all of the resources, and then get rid of, like, hide things that the secret aren't using, right? That the things that aren't using the secret, something like that. Yeah, we can do better.
Definitely.
This opens, like, just doing this redesign makes me excited to like think about more of the resource viewer problems, because it's like, well, now it's like, oh, it looks pretty, I want to use it more.
Right. And then we can use it more for navigation and in summary views like this one.
Well, I mean, just being able to double click is already like, I want to do that now.
Yeah. Well, you can currently you can click on here, but you need to move.
I know. every time I do it, it bugs me. I'm like, oh, I got to click on this thing, and then I got to go over here and click on that. I just want to go into it. No, this is really great.
One final point before we switch topics. Do you think it'd be helpful here, like if we click the, for example, this one, Elasticsearch replica set, and we highlight the first degree nodes that it was connected to?
Might be. Yeah, I think you got to that idea when I was playing here. It would really help. Like, I was playing with this pod and trying to see what's connected to it, and it's kind of hard. Yeah. Might be a different, like, mode of operation when you click some checkbox here, or maybe even a global settings or something like that.
Yeah. I wonder, is that something that's built into Cytoscape for us, where
it's not, but it shouldn't be hard to add that logic
to like add a, like, make the lines bold that are coming out of the thing. Yeah. That would be just that, like, you could click on that and it would bold those lines. That is also good. I want that too.
Only lines, or the connecting nodes as well?
Sure, both. Yeah.
Okay.
This is great.
But I'll try it and see.
I want all these things.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. But I'm really excited that it's right now we are kind of going step by step and doing iteration by iteration. which is much easier than, trying to solve the whole problem. So I mean, I'm excited that this is going.
Oh, another idea. Sorry, it's
Yes.
just they keep coming
No,
now.
no, keep them coming.
What if you could right click a node and perform an action on that object?
Right. Yeah, there's actually, I think it's a right click extension. So there are context menus that are supported by the library. So something like this. Hey, Sam, you're on mute.
Yeah, that's exactly what. Yeah. Okay. This will come together. I think we need to formalize some of the stuff in issues, and because like every time we have these
Absolutely, yeah.
conversations, we just take this like 10 different directions, and
Yeah,
we just need to start focusing on
right.
one thing at a time. Yeah.
But the most important thing is it's possible. So we'll get there.
Excellent. Yeah, this is great. Any other comments before we move on? Actually, that was the last thing we had. So is there anything for the open Q&A before we end the meeting? All right, then. Well, thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week.